what's either the trigger or the timetable for the lawsuit? Is there any particular trigger that's going to make it go forward, or can you help make that more specific?
And once again, those are the kinds of questions I'll talk to people who are really my clients about. Otherwise, I can just say, we're on it.
Pretty soon you're going to tell me.
Move back up front.
First rock in time, I see some residential providers here. I think for all the guardians and everyone else that's not involved in the system, I want to say thank you for giving this opportunity for us to learn how this works. We thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
More of a general question. You're sitting here talking about the cuts. This is all being done from a budgetary aspect. Everyone's not accountants. They're not all bean counters. Who oversees managed care organization from the quality aspect?
Well, the Department of Health Services has that responsibility. So within the Department of Health Services, there's a division called the Division of Long-Term Care. And within that division, there's the Office of Family Care Expansion. So you got to drill down a little bit for that. The administrator of the division is a woman named Pris Baranek. Her assistant is named Beth Robleski. And then there's a variety of staff who report to them in the Office of Family Care Expansion to make sure that from their perspective, the quality is being maintained. Now, I thought it was very interesting. I don't know if anybody in the room has experience with this or not, but there was a woman who I met for the first time last week in the meeting with Department of Health Services named Jen Harrison. She might be somebody who, as you're having to go through some of these changes, you want to have a conversation with, because her focus is supposed to be on quality and what happens specifically when people are transitioning from one home to another. Now, I'm not going to go into any details, but we told a couple horror stories in that meeting last week about very bad outcomes for people who transition from one home to another. And I think that's got to make any family member or guardian really nervous at this point, because you know what you've got now, you don't know what you're going to have if a person has to move into a new home. And supposedly Jen is the person who's supposed to monitor that and make sure the quality outcomes are still being obtained in the new home. But when we start talking about numbers like we were talking about last week, 120 discharges in a room with just 8 providers. And I can't even imagine how many more are going to have to be done by providers who are just not going to be able to continue doing business. And so at some level, that begins to overwhelm a system. But if you're asking for specific accountability within the Department of Health Services, it's starting with Kitty Rhodes, Deputy Secretary. She actually was a legislator who knew more about long-term care in the state than any other legislator. So we thought we'd be in pretty good hands with her. But then we have Pris Baranek, the administrator, Beth Robleski, the assistant administrator, and apparently this Jen Harrison is supposed to be in charge of those transitions and making sure that they end up in a quality place.
And one point I wanted for clarification earlier when you were talking, I believe you were talking to the DHS when they said the savings wouldn't affect any current members, only new members?
I asked a direct question to the Deputy Secretary, Kitty Rhodes. I said, I'm looking at what you're targeting in terms of the amount of reductions you hope to achieve with your sustainability plan for residential services. Have you told the managed care organizations that they need to begin cutting in order to reach your goal? She said no. That is not what she has told the managed care organizations. What she said she had intended and what she believes the department's policy is that that's for new people coming into the system going forward, trying to keep people in their homes longer was one of the main themes. So if a person who used to be able to move out at age 20, a person with intellectual developmental disabilities would move out at age 20, now they want to delay that to age 30 or some other age to try to keep people at home longer because it reduces the cost going forward, helps make the system more sustainable. All I can tell you is what she told me, which is that she said no, she did not give instructions to the MCOs to cut residential services costs.
But does it make sense to you to say it's not going to affect current members when an MCO gets a collective pool that they have to disperse to all members new and old?
I think that we pointed to some of those issues in my presentation with respect to questions about how the capitations are done. They're based on assessments that may not be valid. They're based on assessments that may not be done correctly. They have policy adjustments that are being made that really even the MCOs can't figure out. And when you look at all those things together, plus the fact that they reduced funding for the MCOs overall by 1%, but for some specific ones by even more than that, I think you can see that there's some problems with the way the system's being funded, in addition to the fact that when they lifted the caps, they didn't ask for any more money.